I'm Kaylee Mitchell, and I just arrived home for Christmas Eve, carrying a secret worth $2.1 billion. My family thinks I'm the broke startup founder who can't afford decent clothes. Tomorrow at dinner, they're about to learn that PayForward, my little fintech company they keep dismissing, is actually a $3.5 billion unicorn. They have no idea I've been secretly funding Dad's real estate empire for 18 months through Margaret's legacy fund. Tomorrow night, when Dad tells me I'm too poor to sit at the family table, I'm going to connect my phone to his precious smart TV and show them what real financial success looks like. The rental car's GPS announced my arrival at the familiar colonial house in Newton, Massachusetts, December 23rd, 8:47 p.m. Every window glowed warm against the snowy evening, but I could already feel the chill of what was waiting inside. Two cars I didn't recognize sat in the circular driveway. A sleek black BMW with temporary tags and a silver Mercedes that screamed Wall Street money. My phone buzzed for the 20th time today. Another venture capital firm wanting to discuss our IPO timeline. I glanced at the notification from Andreessen Horowitz and quickly silenced it. Tomorrow's Christmas Eve dinner was going to be interesting enough without fielding calls from billionaire investors while my family lectured me about getting real qualifications. The front door opened before I could knock. Jessica appeared, 29 years old and every inch the successful marketing executive in her cream-colored cashmere sweater that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Her auburn hair was salon-perfect, her smile calculatedly warm. "Kaylee, you made it," she said, stepping back to examine my outfit with the thoroughness of a fashion critic. I could feel her cataloging every detail. Dark jeans from Target, MIT hoodie with coffee stains, boots that had seen better days. Still dressing like a college student, I see. "Good to see you too, Jess." Traffic from Logan was brutal. She gestured toward the living room where animated conversation carried over. "Expensive jazz music. Everyone's here already." Michael flew in from New York this morning, and we've been telling Dad about the promotion and the wedding plans. She paused with that expression I remembered from childhood, the one that meant she was about to deliver a precision strike. "How's your little startup thing going? Still trying to make it work after all?" "This time, something like that," I replied, adjusting my leather bag. Inside was my laptop containing financial reports that would make Goldman Sachs partners weep with envy, but Jessica didn't need to know that yet. The living room hit me like a wall of intimidation mixed with expensive cologne. Dad stood near the fireplace, holding court with a tall man in a perfectly tailored navy suit. This had to be Michael Chen, Jessica's investment banker fiancé. Even from across the room, everything about him radiated Goldman Sachs confidence. Seven-figure salary corner office, the kind of swagger that came from closing $100 million deals. Mom emerged from the kitchen, blonde hair in professional waves, wearing a burgundy dress that complemented the holiday decorations scattered throughout the room. She approached with arms extended, her hostess training in full effect. "Kaylee, sweetheart, you look comfortable," she said after scanning my casual attire. "How was your flight?" "Easy. 40 minutes door to door." Dad looked up from his conversation, his eyes immediately performing the same critical assessment Jessica had given me. Robert Mitchell, 58 years old, self-made real estate developer who'd built Mitchell Properties from nothing. He still carried himself like a man who expected to be the most successful person in any room. "There's our little entrepreneur," he said, his tone carrying just enough condescension to make my stomach clench. "Still playing around with those computer apps?" The man beside him turned, extending a manicured hand with the practiced smoothness of someone who networked for a living. "You must be Kaylee. I'm Michael Chen, Jessica's fiancé, senior vice president at Goldman Sachs in Manhattan." His handshake was firm, professional, but his eyes held that particular brand of polite dismissal I'd grown accustomed to in Silicon Valley. The look that said he'd already categorized me as someone not worth serious business attention. "Nice to meet you," I said. "Congratulations on the engagement." "Thank you. Jessica mentioned you're in the tech space." "Gaming apps or social media?" "Fintech," I replied simply. "Ah," Michael said with the tone of someone who'd just solved a minor puzzle. "Payment processing, mobile banking, that sort of thing." Interesting sector, though. The market's getting pretty saturated. Lots of competition from established players. I nodded politely while calculating that PayForward processed more money in a single day than his biggest deal this year. But Michael didn't need to know that his firm had been desperately trying to land our IPO for the past 6 months. Dad clapped Michael on the shoulder with obvious pride. "Michael here just closed a major deal. 100 million in municipal bonds for Boston Harbor redevelopment. Real business, real impact on the community. That's impressive, I said, meaning it. 100 million was substantial, even if it represented about 6 hours of transaction volume on our platform. Mom appeared at my elbow with a glass of wine from what was obviously an expensive bottle Dad had chosen to impress his future son-in-law. We were just discussing the new smart TV system your father had installed, she said. He's been wanting to do business presentations from home, and the technology is remarkable. You can connect almost anything to it. I accepted the wine and noted the massive screen dominating one wall, sleek and modern against the traditional decor. Perfect for what I had planned for tomorrow night. Jessica settled onto the leather sofa next to Michael, immediately launching into what sounded like a well-rehearsed presentation about her recent promotion to senior marketing director. Corner office team of 12, salary bump to $115,000 that was making wedding planning so much easier. And Michael's been doing incredibly well, she continued, her voice carrying the particular pride that came from reflecting someone else's achievements. His year-end bonus alone could buy a house. Michael waved dismissively, but I could see he enjoyed the attention. It's been a good year. The municipal bonds market has been favorable. Plus, we closed several major infrastructure deals. Dad leaned forward with the expression he wore when discussing serious business matters. That's what I keep trying to explain to people. Real wealth comes from real business. Tangible assets, proven markets, established revenue streams. I took a sip of wine, feeling the words hit their intended target. My phone buzzed again. This time it was David Kim, my co-founder and CTO. I quickly declined the call, but not before Michael noticed. Popular tonight, he said with a smirk. Let me guess, client emergency. Something like that. Dad shook his head with paternal disappointment, still carrying that old phone around. Michael was just showing me his new device. Top-shelf real business features. GPS tracking, secure messaging, the works. I looked up to find all eyes on me, waiting for some response that would fit their narrative of my perpetual struggle to keep up with adult responsibilities. It does what I need it to do, I said simply. The conversation flowed around me like expensive perfume, suffocating in its casual assumptions about success and failure. Jessica and Michael's Back Bay condo purchase with harbor views and monthly maintenance fees that exceeded most people's annual salaries. Dad's latest development project in Brookline that would break ground in March. Mom's interior design client who'd commissioned a complete renovation of their Beacon Hill townhouse. What they didn't know was that Dad's successful Brookline project existed because of Margaret's legacy fund, the anonymous investment vehicle I'd established 18 months ago. $12 million of my money, funneled through a legal structure so sophisticated that Dad's own lawyers had called it a masterpiece of financial engineering. I found myself studying their faces as they talked, noting the ease with which they discussed money and status. These were people who'd never had to prove themselves, never had to fight for recognition. Their achievements fit neatly into categories everyone understood and respected. Marketing executive, investment banker, real estate developer. Clean, simple, explainable. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a notification from our lead investor at Sequoia Capital. I glanced at the screen just long enough to see the subject line about IPO, pricing before turning it face down. Dad's voice cut through my thoughts. You know, Kaylee, I've been thinking about your situation. There are some excellent continuing education programs at Northeastern. Business fundamentals, accounting, marketing strategy. Might be worth considering if you want to get serious about your career. The suggestion hung in the air like a challenge. Around the room, I could see the subtle nods of agreement, the shared understanding that someone needed to have this conversation with, the family disappointment. I appreciate the thought, Dad, because at some point he continued warming to his theme. You need to face reality about this tech thing. It's been what? 2 years now, 3 most startups fail within the first 18 months. Maybe it's time to cut your losses and focus on building some real credentials. Michael nodded sagely. The tech sector is incredibly volatile. Even successful companies can implode overnight. Look at what happened during the dot-com crash, or more recently with some of the crypto ventures. Very risky foundation for a career. Jessica added her own gentle condescension. We're just worried about your future, Kaylee. You're 32 now. Most people our age are buying houses, building retirement accounts, creating stable lives. You can't live off hope and venture capital forever. The irony was so thick I could taste it. Hope and venture capital. If only they knew that Sequoia, Andreessen Horowitz, and Goldman Sachs itself had been courting us for over a year. If only they knew that our last funding round had valued Pay Forward at $3.5 billion, making me one of the youngest female billionaires in the country. Mom tried to soften the intervention with maternal concern. We just want you to be happy and secure, sweetheart. There's no shame in admitting when something isn't working out. Lots of successful people had to change direction in their 30s. I nodded thoughtfully, as if seriously considering their advice, while my phone continued its subtle symphony of notifications. Venture capitalists, investment bankers, tech journalists, all trying to reach the woman they didn't know was sitting in this living room, being lectured about career stability. The smart TV caught my attention again, its massive screen dark but ready. Tomorrow night, during Dad's traditional Christmas Eve performance review, where family members shared their biggest achievements, that screen was going to display numbers that would change everything these people thought they knew about success failure, and the quiet daughter they'd underestimated for so long. You're all right, I said finally. Tomorrow night, I'll definitely have something to share about my career plans and financial situation. Dad smiled with satisfaction, probably thinking he'd finally gotten through to his wayward daughter. Michael and Jessica exchanged pleased glances, no doubt feeling good about their intervention. Mom reached over and squeezed my hand with maternal approval. If only they knew that tomorrow they were going to learn that their broke, struggling startup founder was actually worth more money than everyone in this room combined. If only they knew that the little app company they kept dismissing was about to go public in an IPO that would create the 8th largest tech company in America. Tomorrow night was going to be very, very interesting. Christmas Eve morning arrived with that crisp New England brightness that made snow look like diamonds scattered across our yard. I woke in my childhood bedroom to the sound of Mom orchestrating what could only be described as a military operation downstairs. Her voice carried through the old floorboards as she directed caterers, florists, and what sounded like half of Newton's service industry. I pulled on jeans and a simple sweater, checking my phone for the inevitable overnight avalanche of messages. Sequoia Capital wanted to finalize IPO pricing. Andreessen Horowitz was pushing for an earlier announcement. 3 different tech journalists were requesting exclusive interviews about our unicorn status. I silenced them all and headed downstairs to face whatever fresh condescension breakfast might bring. The house had transformed overnight into something from Architectural Digest. Garland draped every surface, candles flickered in crystal holders, and the dining room table had been extended to accommodate what looked like a small state dinner. Mom stood in the center of it all, clipboard in hand, directing operations with the precision of a Fortune 500 CEO. "Morning, sweetheart," she said without looking up from her detailed timeline. "Flowers arrive at 2, appetizers at 4. Dinner service starts at 7:30 sharp. Your father's been on calls since 6 this morning. Something about year-end reports and investor presentations." I poured coffee from the machine that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, noting the stack of invoices scattered across the kitchen counter. Catering receipts, florist bills, wine delivery confirmations. The numbers added up fast. "This looks incredible, Mom. What's the total damage?" She waved dismissively. "Your father insists on doing Christmas properly. We have standards to maintain, especially with Michael's parents flying in tomorrow. First impressions matter in his world." Jessica appeared in the doorway like she'd stepped off a magazine cover. Cashmere sweater, perfectly styled hair, carrying the wedding planning binder that had become her most prized possession. She settled at the kitchen island with the enthusiasm of someone about to unveil a masterpiece. "Morning," she chirped, opening the binder to reveal pages of photographs, fabric samples, and itemized budgets. "I've been up since 5 finalizing details. The venue coordinator needs numbers today, and we're still confirming the band and menu selections." She flipped through her organized chaos, each page representing another 5-figure expense. The venue was a historic estate in the Berkshires. The photographer had shot celebrity weddings. The band had performed at governors' mansions and Fortune 500 galas. "The final invoice came in yesterday," she continued, pulling out a detailed breakdown that made my coffee cup pause halfway to my lips. $500,000 for everything. Dad's covering the major expenses, thank goodness. I honestly don't know what we would have done otherwise. I studied the numbers over her shoulder, each line item representing more money than most families spent on their entire lives. Venue rental alone was $80,000. Photography was $45,000. The floral arrangements cost more than a luxury car. "That's going to be an incredible wedding," I managed, despite the knot forming in my stomach. Michael appeared in his perfectly pressed button-down, looking like a Ralph Lauren advertisement come to life. He kissed Jessica's cheek and helped himself to coffee, immediately settling beside her to review wedding logistics with the focused attention he probably gave to bond offerings. "Your father's been incredibly generous," he said to Jessica. The venue deposit alone required significant liquidity. Not many parents could handle that kind of financial commitment without impacting their business operations. Dad's entrance interrupted what was becoming an uncomfortable discussion of family finances. He was already dressed for business calls, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing for silence while he wrapped up what sounded like a high-stakes conversation. "Right, I understand completely," he said into the phone. "We'll have the updated projections ready for the board meeting next week. Yes, the fourth quarter numbers exceed all expectations. Thank you for your continued confidence." He hung up and turns to address his assembled family with obvious satisfaction. "That was Margaret's legacy fund," he announced. "Our lead investor for the Brookline project. They're considering expanding their commitment from $12 million to $25 million for the next phase." My coffee cup nearly slipped from my hands. I managed to set it down casually, but my heart was hammering so hard I worried everyone could hear it. Margaret's legacy fund. The anonymous investment vehicle I'd established 18 months ago, named after Nana and structured through the most sophisticated legal framework money could buy. $25 million, Jessica repeated, clearly impressed. "That's some serious investor confidence." Dad's chest puffed with pride. "It's the largest private investment Mitchell Properties has ever attracted. This fund has been absolutely critical to our expansion. Professional, reliable, excellent terms. Whoever's behind it clearly knows quality real estate development when they see it." "What kind of fund is it?" Michael asked with professional curiosity. "Institutional family office sovereign wealth. Anonymous private equity structure," Dad replied. "High net worth individuals who want to diversify into real estate without direct operational involvement. Margaret's legacy has been a godsend. Without their backing, the Brookline project never would have gotten off the ground." My phone buzzed against my leg. I glanced down to see a notification from the Margaret's legacy account manager, our family's attorney, requesting approval for the expanded investment Dad had just mentioned. $25 million that would cement Mitchell Properties as one of Boston's premier development firms, all funded by the daughter he'd spent yesterday evening lecturing about career stability. "Anonymous investors," Jessica mused. "That sounds so mysterious, like something out of a movie." "It's more common than you'd think," Michael said with the authority of someone who'd worked with wealthy clients. "Ultra-high net worth individuals often prefer privacy, especially for investments outside their primary expertise. They'll use sophisticated legal structures to maintain anonymity while still getting exposure to attractive opportunities." Dad nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. Margaret's legacy operates with institutional-level professionalism. Quarterly reports, performance metrics, regular strategic consultations. This isn't some casual family investment. These people understand business." "Speaking of business understanding," Michael continued, seamlessly transitioning to his favorite topic. "Dad mentioned last night that you have some kind of year-end family tradition. Performance reviews." Dad's expression shifted to something between paternal pride and corporate authority. "Every Christmas Eve, we review each family member's achievements and contributions to our collective success. It's about accountability, goal setting, recognizing excellence." The knot in my stomach tightened as I realized what I was walking into. This wasn't just a family dinner. It was a formal evaluation of worth, with Dad as judge and jury of who deserved respect. "What kind of contributions?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. Dad settled into his explanation with obvious relish. "Financial stability, career advancement, family reputation. The metrics that matter in the real world. Jessica's promotion to senior marketing director, for example. That's measurable success that enhances our family's professional standing. And Michael's integration brings substantial value," he continued. "Goldman Sachs' expertise, financial market connections. Career trajectory that opens doors for all of us." Michael had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable with the public discussion of his utility to the family, but he didn't contradict the assessment. "What about you, Kaylee?" Mom asked gently. "What achievements would you like to share about Pay Forward this year?" I felt every eye in the room focus on me with varying degrees of expectation and concern. Upstairs in my laptop bag were financial reports showing that Pay Forward had facilitated over $50 billion in transactions this year. That our platform powered payment processing for Fortune 500 companies. That 3 different firms had offered to buy us for amounts that would make Dad's biggest deal look like pocket change. "We've had steady growth," I said simply. "It's been a valuable learning experience." "That's wonderful, dear," Mom replied with the tone usually reserved for children sharing finger paintings. "Every entrepreneurial journey has educational phases." The conversation moved on, but I remained frozen, staring into my coffee while processing what I'd just learned. The performance review tradition. The expectation that family members justify their existence through financial contribution. The casual dismissal of my business as a learning experience while Dad celebrated investors whose money was actually mine. Jessica pulled out her phone to show Mom photos of her engagement ring, the $8,000 Harry Winston piece that Michael had surprised her with. Dad returned to his business calls, voice carrying the confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. I excused myself and headed upstairs, ostensibly to shower but really to process the magnitude of tonight's revelation. In my room, I opened my laptop and pulled up PayForward's real-time dashboard, 50,000 active business clients across North America. Daily transaction volume averaging $800 million. Quarterly revenue that exceeded Dad's annual business by a factor of 20. My phone rang. David Kim's name appeared on the screen. "How's family time treating you?" he asked when I answered. "Enlightening," I said. "Are we still on track for the IPO announcement? Kaylee Goldman Sachs is practically begging us to move faster. They want to price at $45 per share, which would give us an opening market cap of $8 billion. Your 60% stake would be worth $4.8 billion at open." I stared out my childhood window at the snow-covered yard where Jessica and I had built snowmen 15 years ago. Everything looked exactly the same, but tonight was going to change the fundamental dynamics of this family, forever. "Let's stick to the timeline," I told David, "but make sure the Goldman team knows we're considering other options." "Other options," he repeated with amusement. "Kaylee, every investment bank on Wall Street would murder their own mothers to lead this IPO. What other options?" "Just keep them honest," I said. "I'll call you back after dinner tonight. I think the next few hours are going to be very educational for everyone involved." When I came back downstairs, Jessica was showing off her ring to the catering staff while explaining the wedding budget with obvious pride. $500,000, she announced. "Dad's been so generous. It's wonderful having family support for major life decisions." She looked directly at me when she said it, her meaning unmistakable. Some of us had family support. Others had to figure things out on their own. If only she knew that $12,000 of her precious wedding budget had come from an anonymous contribution I'd made to the family account 3 months ago. If only Dad knew that his mysterious Margaret's legacy investor was sitting right here listening to him celebrate his own success with her money. Tonight was going to be absolutely fascinating. At 6 o'clock sharp, the doorbell began its steady rhythm as the extended family arrived for what Dad had promised would be our most memorable Christmas Eve dinner yet. Uncle Tom was first, stomping snow off his boots and carrying a bottle of wine that probably represented a significant portion of his police captain's salary. Behind him came Claire, his ex-wife, who somehow remained part of family gatherings despite their divorce 2 years ago. "Tom, you made it," Dad said, embracing his younger brother with genuine warmth that I rarely saw him display with his immediate family. "How's the department treating you?" "Can't complain. December's always our busiest month, but we're managing." Tom handed over his wine and surveyed the elaborately decorated living room. "Linda really went all out this year." Claire hugged Mom and me with the gentle efficiency of someone whose nursing career had taught her to assess emotional atmospheres quickly. She'd always been the practical voice in our family chaos, the person who asked real questions instead of making assumptions. Minutes later, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find Maya Rodriguez on the front step, holding a small gift bag and looking slightly overwhelmed by the obvious wealth on display. Maya had been my roommate at MIT, a brilliant computer science major who'd grown up in a working-class family in Lawrence. When she'd mentioned spending Christmas alone in Boston while job hunting, I'd impulsively invited her. "You must be the famous Maya," Mom said graciously. Though I caught her quick assessment of Maya's simple black dress and department store shoes. "Kaylee's told us so much about you." "Thank you for including me, Mrs. Mitchell. I brought homemade cookies from my grandmother's recipe." "How thoughtful," Mom replied, accepting the gift with the kind of smile that was warm but didn't quite reach her eyes. The living room filled with conversation as Dad orchestrated drinks and appetizers with the pride of someone displaying his success. Top-shelf liquor wines, he announced by vintage and price. Appetizers that looked like they belonged in a 5-star restaurant. Maya settled beside me on the sofa, quietly observing the family dynamics with the analytical mind that had made her one of MIT's top graduates. "Your family certainly celebrates in style," she murmured. Jessica launched into her well-rehearsed presentation about her promotion, complete with salary figures and descriptions of her corner office overlooking Boston Harbor. Michael contributed stories about his latest Goldman Sachs deals, casually dropping client names and transaction amounts. "The year-end bonus was particularly generous," Jessica added. $180,000. It's made wedding planning so much more relaxed. Maya's eyebrows rose slightly at numbers that represented more than her parents' made in 3 years combined, but she maintained her polite smile. Dad settled into his favorite chair with expensive scotch, positioning himself to command the room like a corporate boardroom. "Michael, you should see this smart TV system I installed," he said, picking up the remote. "State-of-the-art technology. I can display business presentations, connect to real-time market data, show financial reports. Watch this." The massive screen came to life with a sleek interface showing multiple connectivity options. Dad navigated through menus with obvious technological pride. Probably the same pride he'd feel tomorrow night when that screen displayed my actual net worth. "That's incredible resolution, Mr. Mitchell," Maya said genuinely. "The display quality is remarkable. Your father loves staying current with technology," Mom said indulgently, though I have to admit it's revolutionized his client presentations. Tom had been asking genuine questions about Pay Forward, showing the kind of real interest that made me remember why he'd always been my favorite uncle. "So you're processing payments for small businesses across New England," he said. "That sounds exactly like what local shops need. The independent places get squeezed by the big payment companies." "Exactly," I replied, grateful for someone who understood practical applications instead of dismissing tech as computer games. "We focus on businesses that traditional platforms overlook: restaurants, retail stores, service providers who need affordable, accessible solutions." Claire leaned forward with professional interest. "That makes perfect sense. In my practice, I see how much small business owners struggle with administrative complexity. Anything that simplifies operations has real value." The conversation felt natural until Dad cleared his throat and commanded attention with the authority of someone calling a board meeting to order. "Speaking of business success," he announced, "I should explain our family tradition for everyone who might not be familiar. Every Christmas Eve, we conduct year-end performance reviews where each family member shares their biggest achievement and contribution to our overall family success." Maya shifted uncomfortably beside me. I could see her processing the competitive undertone of what was being presented as a heartwarming tradition. "What kind of contributions?" Tom asked, his police instincts picking up on something problematic. Dad straightened with the authority of someone who'd built his empire from nothing: financial stability, career advancement, family reputation. The achievements that matter in the real world. Jessica's promotion to Senior Marketing Director represents significant advancement that reflects our family's work ethic and values. Jessica beamed unconsciously, sitting straighter as she absorbed the validation. "And Michael's integration brings substantial expertise and financial resources," Dad continued. "His Goldman Sachs success creates opportunities for all of us." Tom glanced at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Claire studied her wine glass with sudden focus. Maya remained perfectly still, but I could feel her tension building. The room fell silent as the weight of the evening's true purpose became clear. This wasn't a family dinner. It was a formal evaluation where worth would be measured and respect allocated accordingly. At 7:30 sharp, Mom appeared in the doorway wearing her most gracious hostess expression. "Dinner is served," she announced, gesturing toward the dining room where candlelight flickered across an extended mahogany table. I followed the group toward what had always been our most formal room, transformed tonight into something from a luxury hotel. The table accommodated 10 place settings, each featuring Mom's finest china, crystal glasses that caught chandelier light, and silver place cards written in her careful calligraphy. I walked around the table checking each elegant card. Jessica's placed her at Dad's right hand, Michael beside her. Tom and Claire positioned across from them. Nana Margaret, who'd arrived during the cocktail hour, had the honored seat at Mom's right. Maya's card sat between Tom and Claire, but no card bore my name. "Mom," I said quietly, "I don't see my place setting." She turned from arranging centerpiece details, her face flushing slightly. "Oh, sweetheart, we're short on space at the main table tonight. With Michael joining us and Maya visiting, we had to make adjustments. You can sit at the kitchen island, it's much more casual there." The words hit like physical blows. I stared at the perfectly arranged table, counting spaces again. 10 chairs, 9 place cards, and somehow no room for the daughter who'd grown up in this house. Maya stepped beside me, her voice low but firm. "Kaylee, if there's not enough room, I can leave. I don't want to cause problems." "No," I said quickly. "You're staying. This isn't about space." Dad appeared in the doorway, surveying his domain with satisfaction. "Everything looks perfect, Linda. You've really outdone yourself." He noticed me standing awkwardly beside the table, and his expression shifted to something that might have been embarrassment if he were capable of such emotion. "Kaylee, honey," your mother explained the seating arrangement. "The kitchen island is actually quite comfortable, very relaxed and informal. I found my voice, though it sounded strange to my own ears. "This is Christmas dinner, Dad. I'm your daughter." "Of course you are, sweetheart." But Christmas dinner costs serious money to host properly. The main table is for family members who contribute financially to our household stability and success. It's just practical arrangement based on economic reality. The casual cruelty took my breath away. Around the room, I could see varying degrees of shock on our guests' faces. Jessica studied her manicured nails with sudden intense interest. Michael shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Tom's face darkened with anger. "Bob, this is completely inappropriate." Dad held up his hand with the authoritative gesture he used when closing business deals. "Tom, let's not create unnecessary drama. It's reasonable accommodation based on practical considerations and current circumstances." Nana Margaret, who'd been listening in silence, slowly rose from her chair. The movement commanded immediate attention from everyone in the room. "If Kaylee isn't welcome at this table," she said in the calm, clear voice that had commanded respect from 40 years of Boston public school students, "then I'll join her in the kitchen." The simple statement dropped into the room like a bomb. Dad's face went pale as he realized his own mother was choosing exile over his seating arrangement. "Ma, that's completely unnecessary," he said, panic creeping into his voice. "There's no need for theatrics. This is about logistics and space management." "It's about respect," Nana replied firmly. "And if you can't see that, perhaps you need to reconsider what family actually means." Uncle Tom stood as well, his police captain authority filling the room. "You know what, Bob? This is ridiculous. Kaylee's been part of this family longer than anyone except Mom. If she's not good enough for your table, maybe I'm not either." The dominoes were falling. Claire moved quietly toward the kitchen with diplomatic efficiency. "I think I'll help coordinate serving," she said. "Make sure everything stays properly heated." Maya remained frozen beside me, her eyes wide with shock at witnessing such casual family cruelty. "We really can leave," she whispered. "This is horrible." I looked around the room at my family, seeing them clearly for perhaps the first time in my adult life. Dad stood rigid with stubborn pride, unwilling to admit error. Mom fluttered between damage control and social anxiety, more concerned about evening success than daughter humiliation. Jessica had managed to disappear into studying her engagement ring. Only Michael showed genuine discomfort, his professional training probably recognizing dysfunctional power dynamics when he encountered them. The silence stretched until I found my voice. "It's okay, Nana. I understand Dad's position completely." Every eye in the room fixed on me as I continued, my voice steady despite rage building in my chest. "Some people measure family value in dollars and cents. Some people think worth requires financial statements and contribution metrics. If this seating arrangement makes you feel better about yourself, Dad, then that's exactly what we'll do." I looked directly at him, seeing him clearly. Not as the successful businessman I'd spent my life trying to impress, but as a small man so insecure about his own worth that he needed to diminish others to feel important. "Maya and I will eat in the kitchen where we belong," I said, "with the people who actually understand that human value can't be calculated on spreadsheets." I turned toward the kitchen, head held high despite humiliation burning in my chest. Maya followed without hesitation. Nana moved with dignity despite Dad's increasingly frantic protests. Tom muttered something that sounded like profanity and stalked after us. As we settled around the kitchen island with plates of expensive catered food, I could hear stilted conversation resuming in the dining room. Dad's voice carried forced joviality as he tried to salvage a social situation that had gone completely off rails. The kitchen felt warmer and more authentic than the formal dining room ever had. Tom poured wine with grim determination. Claire arranged food with professional efficiency. Maya sat quietly, probably regretting her decision to accept my invitation. And Nana looked at me with eyes holding 79 years of accumulated wisdom about family dynamics, social hierarchies, and the true measure of human worth. "There's something you all need to know about your anonymous investor," I said quietly, watching as their faces turned toward me with curiosity and concern. The moment had arrived. The kitchen island became our sanctuary, a circle of warmth in what had become the coldest Christmas Eve dinner in family history. Tom poured wine with the determination of someone who'd witnessed too many family disasters, while Claire arranged serving dishes with the efficient grace that came from managing medical emergencies. Maya sat beside me, still processing what she'd witnessed. Her analytical mind was clearly working overtime, trying to reconcile the family dynamics with what she knew about my actual capabilities from our MIT days. "I can't believe he actually excluded you from dinner," she said quietly, cutting her salmon with precision, in front of everyone. On Christmas Eve, Tom looked up from his wine, his police instincts finally overriding family loyalty. "Maya, I owe you an apology. You shouldn't have witnessed that display of dysfunction. You don't owe me anything, Mr. Mitchell, Maya replied with quiet dignity. But someone should explain to your brother that humiliating family members isn't actually a holiday tradition. Nana Margaret, who'd been listening to the forced conversation drifting from the dining room, made a sound that might have been laughter under different circumstances. This isn't about Christmas traditions, honey, she said to Maya. This is about a man who grew up poor and never recovered from the fear of being poor again. Bob measures everything in dollars because he's terrified of being measured and found wanting himself. She sipped her wine, her 79-year-old eyes holding decades of wisdom about human psychology and family dynamics. When Bob was Kaylee's age, we lived in a 3-room apartment in Southie. His father worked construction when he could find it, and I cleaned houses to make ends meet. Bob swore he'd never feel small again, and he's spent his entire adult life making sure everyone knows he succeeded. The problem is, Claire said gently, setting down her fork, success that requires diminishing other people isn't real success. It's just expensive insecurity. From the dining room came Dad's voice holding forth about market projections and development strategies, probably trying to impress Michael with his business acumen while pretending the last 20 minutes hadn't happened. He asked me for money last year, Nana continued, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Called me crying about financing falling through on the Brookline project. Wanted to borrow against my retirement savings. Tom's head snapped up. He never told me that. Because he was ashamed, Nana replied. Your brother built his identity around being the provider, the successful one, the man who never needs help. Admitting financial trouble would have destroyed his self-image. What did you tell him, I asked, though something in her expression suggested I already knew the answer. That I don't lend money to family members, even successful ones. It changes relationships in ways that can't be undone. She looked directly at me. But anonymous investment through properly structured business arrangements is different. That's professional. My heart stopped. Maya noticed my sudden stillness and looked at me with concern. Tom leaned forward, his detective instincts fully engaged. Mom, what exactly are you talking about? Nana smiled with the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting decades for this conversation. Margaret's legacy fund, she said simply. The anonymous investor that saved your brother's project and probably his entire business. The words hung in the air like a confession. Tom's eyes widened as he processed the implications. Claire set down her wine glass with careful precision. Maya looked between us, trying to piece together a puzzle she didn't have all the pieces for. You knew, I said quietly. Honey, Nana replied with gentle amusement. Did you think I wouldn't recognize my own name on quarterly dividend statements? Though I have to say, your legal team at Ropes and Gray did exceptional work structuring the investment to protect your privacy. Tom stared at me with dawning comprehension. You're Margaret's legacy fund. You're the anonymous investor who saved Bob's business. I nodded, unable to find words. The secret I'd been carrying for 18 months suddenly felt both lighter and infinitely heavier. How much, Tom asked quietly. $12 million, I said, with commitments for up to $25 million depending on project, performance, and expansion opportunities. Maya's fork clattered against her plate. Kaylee, what the actual hell? The kitchen fell silent, except for the continued artificial merriment from the dining room. Dad's voice carried clearly as he explained to Michael how successful entrepreneurs recognize market opportunities and capitalize on them without hesitation. So while he's been treating you like a financial burden, Tom said slowly, you've been bankrolling his success for over a year. Anonymous investment through an LLC structure, I corrected. Completely legal, professionally managed, with appropriate oversight and return expectations. Margaret's legacy fund provides capital for real estate development projects that meet specific criteria for community impact and financial viability. Claire shook her head in amazement. And he has absolutely no idea. None whatsoever. The fund's legal architecture ensures complete investor privacy. As far as Dad knows, Margaret's legacy is operated by some mysterious wealthy benefactor who believes in his vision and development expertise. But that's not even the biggest secret, I continued, pulling out my phone and opening the PayForward app. What I haven't told any of you is what PayForward actually became while you all assumed I was struggling to make rent. I turned the phone screen toward them, displaying our real-time dashboard. The numbers were staggering even to me sometimes. Daily transaction volume, $837 million. Active business clients, 50,214. Monthly recurring revenue, $42 million. Maya was staring at the screen like it was displaying alien technology. The girl I knew at MIT, who stressed about textbook costs, just showed me a business processing nearly $1 billion a day. It gets better, I said, switching to our valuation summary. Last month, Sequoia Capital led our Series D funding round. Pay Forward is now valued at $3.5 billion. I own 60% of the company. Tom was doing mental calculations, his expression shifting from surprise to something approaching awe. 60% of $3.5 billion is $2.1 billion, I finished. Give or take a few million, depending on daily market fluctuations. The silence that followed was complete. Even the sounds from the dining room seemed to fade as my kitchen companions processed what they'd just learned. You're a billionaire, Claire said finally, her nurse's training helping her state facts clearly even when they seemed impossible. On paper, yes. Though the real number will be higher after our IPO next year. Goldman Sachs is projecting an opening market cap of $8 billion, which would make my stake worth approximately $4.8 billion at public launch. Maya had gone completely pale. You've been sitting in that living room listening to Michael brag about $100 million deals when you're worth more than some small countries. The irony wasn't lost on me. Michael's biggest career achievement was a transaction that represented about 3 hours of volume on our platform. His firm had been desperately courting us for months, trying to land the IPO that would generate more commission fees than most investment banks saw in a year. Nana was looking at me with eyes that held more than pride. They held recognition, the satisfaction of someone who'd been waiting for exactly this moment to arrive. Your grandfather used to say that real power is quiet, she said. Loud power is just insecurity with better marketing. From the dining room came Jessica's laughter, bright and artificial as she probably displayed her engagement ring again or discussed wedding planning with the enthusiasm of someone whose biggest financial concern was choosing between premium and ultra-premium catering. Packages. Tom finished his wine and set the glass down with deliberate care. All those times Bob lectured me about financial responsibility after my divorce. All those comments about how I should have been more successful, made better choices, provided better stability. His voice carried years of accumulated resentment and hurt. The whole time you were keeping his business afloat. The whole time he was giving me advice about money management. He was surviving on your investment capital. Not just surviving, I corrected, thriving. Margaret's legacy fund enabled the expansion that made Mitchell Properties one of Boston's premier development firms. Dad's success story is built on a foundation of my money and his complete ignorance of that fact. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. David Kim's name appeared on the screen. That's my co-founder and CTO, I told the group. Probably calling about IPO timeline adjustments or acquisition offers. We get about 5 of those per week now. I declined the call, but not before Tom noticed the interaction. Acquisition offers, he repeated. People want to buy your company. 3 different firms have offered between $4 and $6 billion, I confirmed. We've turned them all down because we think the IPO will generate better long-term value for stakeholders and employees. Claire was staring at me like she'd never seen me before. All this time, we've been worried about your career prospects and financial stability. You've been building one of the most valuable private companies in America. While living in a modest apartment and driving a used Honda, Maya added with something approaching admiration. You've been hiding in plain sight. Nana reached over and patted my hand with the gentle affection of someone whose lessons had taken root exactly as intended. What are you planning to do? She asked quietly. About tonight's performance review. I looked toward the warm light spilling from the dining room, where my family continued their formal celebration, completely unaware that their financial foundation had been quietly constructed by the daughter they'd just publicly humiliated. I'm going to let them finish their evaluation of family contributions, I said, and then I'm going to give them some information that might help them recalibrate their understanding of who contributes what to this family's success. The sounds from the dining room continued, but something fundamental had shifted in the kitchen. The real conversation was happening here, among people who understood that worth couldn't be measured in seating charts or social hierarchy. Soon I thought checking my phone as another notification lit up the screen. Very soon everything was going to change. At 8:15, Dad's voice carried from the dining room with the authority of someone calling a board meeting to order. Time for dessert, in our family tradition, he announced. Everyone back to the living room for gift exchange and performance reviews. The kitchen group exchanged glances. Our exile had lasted exactly 45 minutes, but it felt like a lifetime of revelations and shifting power dynamics. Tom drained his wine glass with the determination of someone preparing for confrontation. Claire gathered serving plates with practiced efficiency. Maya looked at me with concern that had only deepened throughout our conversation. Nana rose from her chair with the dignity of someone who'd been teaching difficult lessons for 79 years. Well, she said with a slight smile, I suppose it's time for real education to begin. We filed back into the living room where the Christmas tree dominated one corner, surrounded by carefully arranged presents that probably cost more than most families spent on their entire holiday celebration. The formal dining room had been abandoned. Dirty dishes left for catering staff to handle while Dad orchestrated the evening's finale. Jessica sat on the sofa beside Michael, her cheeks flushed with wine and the satisfaction of having successfully navigated dinner without uncomfortable confrontations. Her engagement ring caught tree lights as she gestured about wedding planning. Details. Dad stood near the fireplace like a master of ceremonies, holding the crystal tumbler of his best scotch. The lighting was perfect, the setting elegant, everything designed to create the impression of a successful American family celebrating their achievements. Now that we're all here, he began, let's continue our year-end tradition. As I explained earlier, each family member shares their biggest achievement and contribution to our family's continued success and financial stability. He raised his glass in what felt more like a corporate presentation than family celebration. Jessica, why don't you start us off? Tell everyone about your promotion and engagement to Michael. Jessica straightened with obvious pleasure at being chosen to lead. This year has been absolutely incredible, she began, launching into detailed account of her advancement to senior marketing director. The corner office overlooking Boston Harbor, salary increased to $115,000, expanded responsibilities managing a team of 12 marketing professionals. And of course she continued, displaying her engagement ring like the trophy Michael proposed in October. We've been planning the most beautiful wedding for June at the Whitmore Estate, in the Berkshires. Dad beamed with parental pride. $500,000 for a wedding that will be featured in Boston Magazine and Martha Stewart Weddings. That's the kind of success and social recognition that reflects positively on our entire family. Michael shifted uncomfortably at public discussion of finances, but managed to smile when Dad clapped him on shoulder. Michael's contribution to our family is equally impressive, Dad continued. Investment banking at Goldman Sachs. Year-end bonus of $180,000. Professional expertise that opens doors and creates opportunities for all of us. The praise continued for several minutes, each accomplishment carefully cataloged and assigned appropriate value in Dad's hierarchy of family worth. Tom received grudging acknowledgement for his promotion to police captain. Claire was thanked for her continued presence despite divorce from Tom. Finally, his attention turned to me. I could feel the weight of every gaze in the room, expectation that I would play my assigned role as family disappointment with gracious humility. And Kaylee, he said with the tone of someone saving the most challenging part for last. What would you like to share about your year with Pay Forward and your plans for building real financial stability? I remained seated in a chair near the window, hands folded calmly in my lap. We've had steady growth, I said simply. It's been educational. That's wonderful, dear Mom interjected with forced enthusiasm. Every business has its learning phases and developmental stages. Dad set down his scotch and moved to stand directly in front of me, his expression shifting to something more serious and paternal. He looked around the room, ensuring he had everyone's attention. You know what? I think this is a good time for some honest family conversation, he said, his voice taking on the tone he used for important business discussions. Kaylee, I want you to understand something. The seating arrangement tonight wasn't arbitrary or meant to hurt your feelings. It was about facing reality. He gestured toward the elegant dining room. That table represents success. It represents financial stability, career achievement, the kind of life we've built through hard work and smart decisions. Every person who sat there tonight has proven they can contribute meaningfully to this family's prosperity and reputation. His voice grew more intense, more personal. I grew up poor, sweetheart. Really poor. I know what it looks like, what it smells like, how it feels to have nothing and be nobody. I swore I would never let that happen to my family. I built Mitchell Properties from nothing, brick by brick, deal by deal, because I refused to accept poverty as our family's destiny. Tom started to interrupt, but Dad held up his hand. Let me finish. When I see you struggling with this startup for 3 years, when I see you living in that tiny apartment driving that old Honda, wearing clothes from Target, it breaks my heart. Not because I don't love you, but because I recognize the signs. I see poverty creeping back into our family, and I won't stand for it. His voice cracked slightly with emotion. You think I'm being cruel? But I'm trying to save you from the mistake that could define your entire life. I was too poor to sit at certain tables when I was young. I was excluded from conversations, from opportunities, from respect because I didn't have money. I know what that feels like, and I will not watch my daughter experience that same humiliation. The room had gone completely silent. Even Jessica looked uncomfortable with the raw honesty in Dad's voice. That's why I suggested community college courses. That's why I'm pushing you toward stable employment. Not because I don't believe in you, but because I believe in you too much to watch you waste your potential on something that clearly isn't working. 3 years, Kaylee. 3 years with nothing to show for it except mounting debt and false hope. He looked directly at me, his eyes holding what might have been tears. Being poor is not acceptable in this family, not because I'm shallow or materialistic, but because I know what poor does to people. It destroys dreams, ruins relationships, kills opportunities. I won't let that happen to you even if you hate me for trying to prevent it. Mom was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. Michael studied his hands with obvious discomfort. Maya looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. So yes, Dad continued, I made you sit in the kitchen tonight. Because until you can prove you're not sliding toward poverty, until you can show real income and real stability, I can't pretend everything is fine. I can't believe that this tech experiment is anything more than an expensive failure waiting to happen. The silence that followed was crushing. Dad had just laid his heart bare, revealed his deepest fears and motivations, explained his cruelty as misguided love. Well, Dad said, attempting to restore some normalcy, let's begin gift exchange. I think everyone will be surprised by what we've chosen this year. He moved to a tree and began distributing packages. Jessica received jewelry, a luxury handbag, and a designer watch. Michael got expensive Scotch golf accessories and a leather briefcase. Practical gifts for Tom and Claire, appropriate presents for Maya and Nana. Finally, Dad handed me a single envelope with an expression of desperate hope. For Kaylee, he announced a practical gift that addresses her future planning needs. I opened an envelope to find a brochure for Northeastern University's continuing education program. Business courses for working adults. Basic accounting, marketing fundamentals, business plan development. Maybe it's time to get some real qualifications instead of playing around with apps, Dad said quietly. Business education that could actually help you build a stable career with reliable income. I'm not trying to crush your dreams, sweetheart. I'm trying to give you tools to make them sustainable. The catalog felt heavy in my hands, representing everything my family feared I lacked. But Dad's emotional confession had changed something. This wasn't just about control or judgment. This was about a man terrified of watching his daughter repeat his childhood experiences with poverty. Tom's face had darkened with anger, but before he could speak, I stood up calmly and walked to where my phone lay on the side table. Actually, Dad, I said, my voice steady despite rage and heartbreak warring in my chest. I think it's time for some honest family conversation from my side, too. You're absolutely right that poor is unacceptable. You're right that financial stability matters. You're right that this family deserves success and prosperity. I looked around the room at these people who'd shaped my understanding of worth and value. What you're wrong about is assuming you know anything about my actual financial situation. Since we're discussing qualifications and contributions to family prosperity, let me show you exactly what I've been building while you've been measuring my worth by my wardrobe. I reached for my phone, fingers steady despite adrenaline coursing through my veins. It was time to connect to that smart TV system Dad was so proud of. You said I was too poor to sit at the dinner table, Dad. Let's see how that assessment holds up against my actual bank statements. The smart TV came to life with a soft chime as my phone connected seamlessly to Dad's state-of-the-art system. The irony wasn't lost on me that his pride in modern technology was about to become the instrument of his complete humiliation. Since we're discussing financial qualifications and family contributions, I said, navigating to my business dashboard, I thought you might appreciate seeing my actual year-end summary and current financial position. The Pay Forward logo appeared on the massive screen, clean and professional against the elegant living room backdrop. Below it, real-time data began populating in neat columns and charts that told a story none of them were prepared to hear. Dad squinted at the display, his confidence wavering as numbers appeared that didn't match his understanding of my circumstances. What exactly am I looking at here? Sweetheart, Pay Forward's current performance metrics, I replied calmly, pulling up the detailed breakdown. Our payment processing platform for small and medium businesses across North America. The screen filled with data that represented 18 months of building, something extraordinary, while my family dismissed my efforts as expensive. Delusion. 50,214 active business clients. Daily transaction volume averaged $837 million. Monthly recurring revenue of $42 million. Revenue growth of 460% over the previous year. Jessica's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips as she processed numbers that dwarfed anything she'd encountered in her marketing career. Michael leaned forward, his Goldman Sachs training automatically calculating implications of what he was seeing. That's our client base, I continued. switching to a geographic map showing PayForward's reach across all 50 states and 3 Canadian provinces, coffee shops in Seattle, auto repair shops in Detroit, bookstores in Vermont, restaurants in Miami, small businesses that needed affordable payment solutions, the big platforms, overlooked or overcharged. Mom's voice came out as barely a whisper. Those are real businesses. Real money, very real, I confirmed, pulling up client testimonials and case studies. Here's the bakery in Portland that increased revenue 35% after switching to our system. The auto shop in Cleveland that cut processing costs in half. The boutique in Charleston that expanded online because our platform made e-commerce accessible and affordable. Dad was staring at the screen with the expression of someone trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces. But this is just transaction processing. Where's the actual company value? Where's your profit? I opened my personal banking app, the interface clean and unmistakable as it displayed my account summary. The numbers appeared on screen in crisp, undeniable clarity. Current liquid assets, $237 million. The silence in the room was absolute. Even distant sounds from the kitchen seemed to have stopped as my family processed what they were seeing. Jessica's champagne glass slipped from nerveless fingers, crystals shattering against the hardwood floor and sending champagne across. Mom's expensive rug. The sound seemed to break the spell of shocked silence. What Jessica whispered, staring at the screen like it might change if she looked hard enough. Personal net worth as of December 23rd, I said, switching to my investment portfolio. The breakdown appeared in neat categories that painted a picture of sophisticated wealth management. $1.4 billion in PayForward equity based on our latest valuation. $600 million in diversified investments managed through Goldman Sachs. Private wealth management. $200 million in real estate holdings across Boston, San Francisco, and Austin. $100 million in liquid assets and emergency funds. Michael was studying the numbers with professional recognition, his investment banking experience allowing him to understand immediately that these weren't inflated projections or wishful thinking. These were real assets, real wealth, professionally managed and conservatively diversified. Dad's face had gone through several color changes, settling on pale gray that made me worry about his blood pressure. "But you live so simply," he stammered. "That apartment, those clothes, that old car. I live below my means, so I corrected him. There's a difference between being poor and choosing not to broadcast your wealth to people who measure human worth by designer labels and luxury cars." Mom had sunk into her chair, one hand pressed to chest like she was having trouble breathing. "Is that real money?" she asked faintly. "Not stock options or projected earnings, but actual money you can access and spend." "Yes, Mom. Very real money that I can access anytime I choose." I scrolled through recent transactions, each one time-stamped and documented. Quarterly dividend payments from my investment portfolio. Monthly distributions from PayForward's profit sharing. Real estate rental income from properties I owned in 3 different cities. Private equity returns from startups I'd invested in. Dad was still staring at the screen, his business mind trying to reconcile the daughter he'd been treating like a financial burden with numbers that dwarfed his own considerable success. But how he said his voice barely above whisper. "You graduated 4 years ago with student loans. You moved back to Boston with nothing but an MIT degree and big ideas. I built it," I said simply. "One client at a time, one transaction at a time, one smart business decision at a time. While you were measuring my worth by my willingness to spend money on designer, clothes, and luxury dinners." Tom was shaking his head slowly, a smile spreading across his face despite tension in the room. "All those lectures about real business and practical success," he said. "All those comments about getting serious about your financial future." Jessica had found her voice, though it came out higher and shakier than usual. "But the development costs alone, the legal fees for payment processing systems, the regulatory compliance expenses. How did you fund all that initially? Combination of angel investment, strategic partnerships, and careful reinvestment of early profits," I replied. "Plus some very smart decisions about which venture capital firms to work with and which opportunities to pursue versus avoid." I switched to a screen that would deliver the real shock, the one that would reframe everything they thought they knew about our family's financial dynamics and Dad's business success. "There's something else you should probably know about family contributions and financial stability," I said, opening a separate business account interface. The screen displayed Margaret's legacy fund management dashboard, showing an investment portfolio worth $12 million, with detailed breakdowns of real estate development projects funded over the past 18 months. Dad's eyes widened as he recognized the numbers, project names, investment timeline that perfectly matched his company's most successful period. Margaret's legacy fund, he said slowly, words coming out like prayer or curse. The anonymous investor that provided $12 million for your Brookline development project, I confirmed. The fund that's been backing Mitchell Properties' expansion for the past year and half, enabling your transition from struggling local developer to premier Boston real estate firm. The revelation hit the room like physical force. Michael's professional composure cracked as he realized the implications. Jessica stared at the screen with dawning horror. Mom made a sound that might have been sob or laugh. And Dad, the man who'd spent the evening lecturing about poverty and financial responsibility, stood frozen as he processed the fact that his recent business success had been built on money from the daughter he'd just publicly humiliated for being too poor to sit at his dinner table. "You," he whispered, pointing at the screen like it was displaying evidence of some impossible crime. "You're Margaret's legacy. You're the anonymous investor. You saved my business." I nodded calmly, watching as everything they thought they knew about power and success and family hierarchies crumbled around them. "Anonymous investment through legally structured LLC," I said. "Professional terms, competitive returns, complete confidentiality. Exactly the kind of real business arrangement you've always said you respected, Dad. The kind that builds wealth through smart capital allocation rather than flashy spending." The smart TV continued displaying evidence of my success, numbers that told a story none of them had been prepared to hear. And in that moment, surrounded by wreckage of their assumptions, my family finally began to understand who I really was. But this was just the beginning. The silence stretched for what felt like eternity before Dad finally found his voice. The words came out strangled, barely recognizable as belonging to the confident businessman who'd been holding court just minutes earlier. "Margaret's legacy fund," he repeated, staring at the screen like he was trying to decode foreign language. "That's been you this entire time." I nodded calmly, watching as the full implications hit him wave by wave. The anonymous investor who saved his Brookline project when traditional financing fell through. The mysterious benefactor who'd provided capital for his company's biggest expansion. The professional, reliable fund that had restored his confidence in his own business acumen. All of it had been his daughter, the daughter he'd just excluded from Christmas dinner for being too poor to deserve respect. "But the phone calls, the meetings with attorneys," Dad stammered. "We've been working with Margaret's legacy for over a year. There were contracts, legal documents, and professional presentations, all handled through my legal team at Ropes and Gray," I confirmed. Completely legitimate business structure designed to protect investor privacy, while providing competitive returns on carefully selected real estate development projects. Michael was studying the fund's performance metrics with focused attention of someone whose professional reputation depended on understanding complex financial structures. His Goldman Sachs training allowed him to recognize sophisticated wealth management when he saw it. "This is properly structured investment LLC," he said quietly, his voice carrying professional respect that hadn't been there an hour earlier. "Multi-asset portfolio, diversified risk management, institutional-level legal protection. This isn't someone playing around with computer games." Jessica was staring at her engagement ring, her face cycling through emotions I couldn't identify. Shock, embarrassment, and something that might have been dawning realization that her entire understanding of family dynamics had just been turned upside down. "The wedding expenses," she said, suddenly her voice barely above whisper. "Mom mentioned an anonymous contribution to our family account last month. That helped cover venue deposit and catering down payments." I pulled up another screen showing a family assistance fund I'd established through a different LLC structure. Discreet financial support provided to family members during major life events, structured to protect both donor and recipient privacy. $15,000 transferred in October, I confirmed, to help with wedding planning expenses and reduce financial stress during your engagement period. Jessica's hand flew to her mouth as if she was going to be sick. "All this time I've been celebrating Dad helping with wedding costs, and it was actually your money paying for everything." Mom had gone very pale, gripping the arms of her chair like she needed physical support to process what she was hearing. "The interior design business equipment loan," she said faintly. "The $50,000 we received last spring when the bank initially declined our small business application." "Margaret's legacy, small business initiative," I replied, showing yet another fund structure on screen. "Supporting women-owned businesses with growth capital and favorable repayment terms." Tom was shaking his head slowly, but his expression held admiration rather than disbelief. "All those times Bob lectured me about financial responsibility after my divorce," he said. "All those comments about how I should have managed money better, been more successful, provided better stability for my family. The entire time he was surviving on Kaylee's investment capital, Claire added quietly. Her medical training in family dynamics allows her to see psychological implications more clearly than anyone else in the room. Michael had been studying the numbers with increasing intensity, and suddenly his face went completely white. He set down his scotch with shaking hands. "Oh my God," he said, his voice cracking. "Pay forward. Your company is Pay Forward." I raised an eyebrow. "You've heard of us." "Heard of you?" Michael repeated, almost laughing with hysteria. "Kaylee Goldman Sachs has been chasing Pay Forward for 8 months. We've been trying to land your IPO. It would be the biggest tech offering we've handled in 5 years. The room went dead silent as this new information sank in. "Your managing directors have been in meetings about Pay Forward every week." Michael continued, his professional composure completely shattered. "The commission fees alone would be $40 million. It's the deal everyone in investment banking is fighting for." He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. "All evening I've been condescending to you about tech sector volatility. I've been sitting next to the founder of the company my entire firm is desperately trying to court, and I've been treating you like an amateur who doesn't understand real business." Dad had sunk into his chair, the weight of revelation replacing his earlier confident posture. "I don't understand," he said, his voice carrying the confusion of someone whose entire worldview had just been dismantled. "Why would you help us anonymously? Why not tell us it was your money? Because I knew exactly how you'd react," I replied simply. "If I'd approached you directly, you would have dismissed it as charity from your unsuccessful daughter. You needed to believe money came from someone you respected, someone worthy of your attention." The truth of that statement hit the room like a physical blow. Everyone knew it was accurate. Dad's pride, his need to be seen as successful and self-sufficient, would never have allowed him to accept direct help from a daughter he considered financial failure. But anonymous investment from a mysterious wealthy fund that was legitimate business, that was something he could accept without damaging his self-image. Michael was still staring at me with dawning horror. "The IPO filing," he said weakly. "Goldman's been preparing presentation materials for months. We've researched every aspect of Pay Forward's business model, growth trajectory, and competitive positioning. I've personally reviewed your financial statements dozens of times." He paused, processing implications. "Your net worth isn't $2.3 billion. Based on our IPO projections, you're going to be worth closer to $5 billion after public offering." Maya had been sitting quietly through the entire revelation, her analytical mind processing implications of what she was witnessing. Finally, she spoke up, her voice cutting through family drama with outside perspective. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," she said, looking around the room. "Kaylee has been financially supporting this family for over a year while you've all been treating her like she was struggling to pay rent. She funded your business expansion, helped pay for weddings, supported your mother's business loan, and your response was to exclude her from Christmas dinner because she was too poor to deserve a seat at the family table." The stark summary hung in the air, undeniable in its accuracy and devastating in its implications. Dad was studying his hands with something that might have been shameful. "All those lectures about facing reality and building a stable career," he said quietly. "All those comments about getting real qualifications and abandoning delusions. You were lecturing a billionaire about financial responsibility," Tom added with a mixture of amazement and disgust. Michael had pulled out his phone and was frantically scrolling through emails. "The Goldman Sachs partners are going to have a collective heart attack when they find out I spent Christmas Eve insulting the Pay Forward founder," he muttered. "Actually," I said, switching to another screen, "there's one more thing you should probably know about your firm's relationship with Pay Forward." The display showed email correspondence between Goldman Sachs and Pay Forward's legal team, including detailed IPO timeline pricing discussions and fee negotiations. "We've been in active discussions with your firm for 6 months," I explained. "The IPO is scheduled for March with Goldman Sachs as lead underwriter. Your team has been calling it the deal of the decade." Michael's phone slipped from his hands, clattering against the coffee table. He stared at a screen showing his own firm's desperate attempts to secure a business relationship with a woman he'd been patronizing all evening. "The commission structure alone," he whispered, "would make this the most profitable IPO Goldman has handled since Facebook." I nodded calmly. $47 million in underwriting fees, plus ongoing wealth management services for my post-IPO portfolio. Your managing directors consider it a career-defining opportunity. Around the room, my family was beginning to understand not just that they'd been wrong about my financial situation, but that they'd been spectacularly, catastrophically wrong in ways that would have professional and personal consequences for years to come. But we weren't finished yet. Christmas morning arrived with that peculiar quiet that follows emotional earthquakes. I woke in my childhood bedroom to sunlight streaming through windows that overlooked the same snowy yard where Jessica and I had built snowmen 15 years ago, but everything felt fundamentally different. The house was unusually silent for Christmas morning. No sounds of excited gift unwrapping or Mom bustling around the kitchen preparing breakfast, just the soft creaking of old floorboards and the distant hum of the heating system working against December cold. I found Dad in the kitchen at 6:30, already dressed and sitting on an island with a cup of coffee and his laptop. He looked like he'd aged a decade overnight, his usually confident posture replaced by something that resembled defeat. "Morning," I said quietly, pouring myself coffee from a machine that had cost more than most people's monthly car payments. He looked up, his eyes holding an expression I'd never seen before. Mixture of shame, confusion, and something that might have been respected. "I've been going through Margaret's legacy fund documentation," he said, gesturing at the laptop screen. "Your legal team really is exceptional. The structure is sophisticated, returns are competitive. Oversight is professional, this isn't an amateur operation." I settled onto a stool across from him, cradling my coffee cup like armor. "I told you it was real business, Dad." He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee like it might contain answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "Multiple apologies, actually. For last night, for seating arrangement. For treating you like a charity case when you've been the one keeping my business afloat." The admission hung between us, heavy with implications neither of us was quite ready to explore. Jessica appeared in the doorway looking subdued and uncertain. Her perfectly styled hair was mussed from sleep, and she wore simple pajamas that suggested she'd been too emotionally exhausted to maintain usual appearance standards. "Good morning," she said carefully, like she was testing the temperature of room. "Morning, Jess." She poured coffee with hands that weren't quite steady, then joined us at Island. Silence stretched uncomfortably until she found her voice. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," she began. "About wedding expenses, about anonymous family account contributions. I need to understand how that worked." I explained Family Assistance Fund structure, how it provided discreet support during major life events without creating obligation or embarrassment for recipients. Jessica listened with focused attention to someone whose entire understanding of family dynamics was being rewritten. "So when I was celebrating Dad helping with wedding costs," she said slowly, "it was actually your money I was bragging about." "Partially," I confirmed. Dad did contribute significantly from his own resources. The fund just provided additional support to ensure you could have the wedding you wanted without financial stress. Mom emerged from the master bedroom, looking fragile in a silk robe and designer slippers. She moved with the careful precision of someone navigating emotional landmines. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her hostess training overriding awkwardness as she busied herself with breakfast preparations that catering staff would normally handle. We gathered around Kitchen Island, 4 people who shared decades of history but were essentially strangers to each other in this new reality. The formal dining room remained abandoned, its elegant place settings a reminder of last night's failed performance. Michael appeared 20 minutes later, dressed in kind of casual clothes that still managed to look expensive. His investment banking training had obviously helped him process previous evening's revelations faster than the rest of the family. "I've been thinking about PayForward's business model," he said, settling beside Jessica with coffee and genuine professional interest. "Market penetration in the small business sector is impressive. Have you considered expansion beyond North America?" "We've had inquiries from businesses in the European Union and Asia-Pacific region," I replied. "But I prefer controlled growth over rapid expansion. Sustainable development, rather than venture capital pressure to scale too quickly." Tom and Claire arrived together, bringing Maya, who'd spent the night at their place rather than endure continued tension in our house. Their presence helped normalize the atmosphere, providing a buffer between family members who were still learning how to relate to each other. Maya looked at me with a concerned expression of someone who'd witnessed emotional trauma and wanted to make sure I was processing it healthily. "How are you feeling about all this?" she asked quietly while others organized breakfast. "Relieved," I said honestly. Secrets are exhausting to carry, especially when they involve family. Last night was brutal, but at least now everyone knows the truth. My phone rang, David Kim's name lighting up the screen. I stepped away to take a call, aware that my family was listening to every word. "Kaylee, we need to discuss the IPO timeline," David said. "Goldman Sachs wants to accelerate the schedule. They're pushing for a February announcement with a March public offering." I found myself looking around the kitchen at my family, all of them pretending not to listen while obviously hanging on every word of my conversation. "What's driving the rush?" I asked. "Market conditions are optimal, and they're concerned about competitive pressure." Plus, after yesterday's acquisition offers, they want to move before someone makes a bid we can't refuse. Let me call you back in an hour, I told David. I want to discuss some strategic considerations with my advisors. When I hung up, Dad was staring at me with barely concealed curiosity. IPO acceleration, he asked. Goldman Sachs wants to move our public offering from June to March, I explained. They're projecting an opening market cap of $8 billion, which would make my stake worth approximately $4.8 billion at public launch. The numbers hit the room like physical objects. Even Michael, accustomed to large financial transactions, looked impressed by the scale of what I was discussing. Jessica was studying her engagement ring with new understanding. The $8,000 ring that had seemed so impressive yesterday now felt microscopic compared to wealth that had been sitting quietly at family dinners for years. What would you do with that much money, Mom asked, her voice carrying genuine curiosity rather than the dismissive tone I'd grown accustomed to. Expand community investment programs, I said. Margaret's legacy fund has been successful supporting local real estate, development, and women-owned businesses. I want to scale it nationally. Create more opportunities for entrepreneurs who get overlooked by traditional funding sources. Michael cleared his throat carefully. Speaking of Goldman Sachs, I should probably mention that my managing directors are going to want an emergency meeting when they learn about last night's conversation. The firm's relationship with Pay Forward is their highest priority account. I switched my phone to display email from Goldman's senior partners. 3 missed calls since midnight urgent meeting requests. Apologies for any miscommunication during holiday period. Your colleagues have been busy, I said, showing him the screen. Apparently word traveled fast about Christmas Eve dinner dynamics. Michael's face went pale as he read emails from his supervisors. They're offering to replace the entire account team if there were any protocol violations or unprofessional interactions. I set the phone down calmly. Michael, your firm will remain lead underwriter for IPO because you provide best execution and market positioning. Personal family dynamics don't change business relationships. But there is one condition for maintaining engagement, I continued. Goldman Sachs will establish a $50 million fund for supporting women entrepreneurs, with particular focus on technology startups founded by underrepresented founders. Michael nodded eagerly. I can get that approved by Monday. The partners will consider it a strategic investment in relationship management. Nana Margaret smiled with satisfaction at someone whose lessons had taken root exactly as intended. That sounds like the kind of success that actually matters, she said, raising her coffee cup and small toast. Building something that helps other people build something of their own. Morning continued with cautious conversation and careful questions, my family slowly adjusting to their new understanding of who I was and what I'd accomplished. Dynamic had shifted permanently, but in ways that felt healthier rather than simply different. By noon, we were gathered around the Christmas tree again, but this time the gift exchange felt authentic rather than performative. Expensive presents seemed less important somehow, overshadowed by more valuable gifts of truth and recognition that had been exchanged the night before. As afternoon faded into evening, I realized that sometimes the best Christmas present isn't something that comes wrapped in expensive paper. Sometimes it's the gift of finally being seen clearly by people whose opinion has shaped your entire understanding of your own worth. Dad approached me as the family began preparing to leave. I want you to know, he said quietly, that everything I said last night about poverty and fear, I meant it. But I was wrong about you, completely catastrophically wrong. You weren't wrong about poverty being unacceptable, I replied. You were just wrong about who in this family was actually experiencing it. If you've ever felt underestimated by your own family, remember this story. Your value isn't determined by their recognition, and your success doesn't require their approval. Build your own definition of worth. Create your own opportunities, and never let anyone convince you that their inability to see your potential reflects your actual capabilities. Sometimes the best seat at any table is the one you build yourself, surrounded by people who recognize your true value from the beginning. And sometimes, just sometimes, the people who underestimated you most will learn to see you clearly when the numbers become too big to ignore. The Pay Forward IPO launched 3 months later at $52 per share, creating the 7th largest technology company in America and making it worth approximately $6.2 billion. But that's another story entirely.